Hi everyone, and welcome to the session today. We're very excited for today's session on broadcast tech impact discussion. So today we've got Kerry Norman, VP of Technology Operations and Discovery, Tim Sargent, Head of Product Video and Live Systems in the BBC, and George Cook, Head of Engineering at Electric Theatre Collective in London. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you very much.
So today the panel are going to discuss some of the biggest challenges they faced during the pandemic and how they've adapted to the new working environments and what's next on their radar. So I'm going to have a quick discussion with them, each of them, and interview each of them, and then we'll have a group discussion. So Kerry, I'm going to come to you first. We'll get straight into it. During the pandemic, your team launched a new IT ops centre in Poland, and this sounds like a massive undertaking. So tell us about the project.
Yeah, okay. So at the tail end of 2019, we started going through quite a lot of change and transformation in Discovery. So we made a decision to open up a new technology operations centre in Poland, and that's to support a lot of our sort of new output and primarily all of our IT infrastructure and network. So they're the eyes and ears of Discovery. So we went through the changes end of 2019, and in 2020, just as we were just about to start recruiting and building the new operations centre, we obviously went and hit the pandemic. So no one was allowed to travel. I had to get a whole technology operations centre built. So we had DB doing a lot. We had Halsey building a lot of our kit. We then couldn't ship it into the country. I had struggles in recruiting because people didn't want to actually leave their jobs because of 3-month probation and stuff like that in Poland. And I had a deadline of 3 months to get it done. So that was the build and getting everyone in to make sure that we had eyes and ears watching everything in Discovery. So,
wow.
So whereby, initially you think, oh yeah, we can just go and recruit and get people in. It was a hell of a lot harder. So we actually ended up getting headhunters to go out and find people, and there's a lot of convincing people to come in. But so the challenges, I say, is then as soon as we managed to recruit the people, and we got most of the tech working out there for them, we got them in the office, and then we were told the office had to close. So then we had to send everyone home. We had to ship a load of kit out from the UK, but you couldn't get everything into the country. So then we were trying to source things locally in Poland. And I think, so we got about 40 people in the end, and got it up and running. But then it came to training everyone, and where normally we'd be sending people out to work with them, to train them, everything was done remotely. The whole thing was done remotely. At the same time as trying to keep them in the business. So it wasn't particularly easy. But actually, we did it. We've got everyone in, we've set it up. We've got some really good managers out there and a great group of staff. And it's still running. We still managed to build the whole thing. I opened up the office again, I think it was last month, to get them all in. So they actually got to meet each other. We had 1 day of opening it, and then Krakow hit a really big hit in COVID, and they all had to go home again. So the problem we've got now is we've got the Olympics coming up. None of these staff have ever met each other. So,
yeah, I mean, I guess that's the challenge, isn't it? When you're opening an IT ops centre in the UK, at least you're working within the same parameters of COVID, but now you're working across different countries. You've got to, keep one eye on what's happening in terms of COVID in Poland, one eye here. That must be really quite challenging.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, I managed to get over in between the two COVID, when we opened up, and I got over there for 2 days, met a load of people outside on deck chairs, all social distancing, and then I had to fly back because it hit again, and I didn't know if I'd get back into the UK. So I've met maybe 10 of them, but not the rest.
Wow.
Everything's done on virtual. So I kind of do a virtual down the pub with Kerry once a month. So everyone has it fun. We all sit there, and because it's keeping people motivated. It's not always easy, especially when they don't know each other.
I mean, out of all those different challenges that you've touched on in terms of tech and people and cultural challenges and logistical challenges, what do you think for you was the most, most intense in terms of what was the biggest challenge?
Well, because we've got the Olympics obviously coming up. And there's a lot of training. You know, some of these people don't come from broadcast, so you've had to train them on broadcast. And we've had a great guy, Mike Donnu, which I'm sure many people in the industry know. We had him training people remotely, showing them kit. You know, normally they'd put their hands on kit to understand it. So it was definitely, I'd say, the training part. And obviously keeping engaged when you've got people training all online, sitting at a desk it's not easy. It's not easy.
It's that human factor, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's really important.
It is very important. We're going to talk about that a little bit later with, you know, with the rest of the group in terms of, you know, keeping people engaged and motivated and their well-being. But tell us, you know, what learnings you've taken from that project in Poland and how you're going to kind of translate them across to the preparation for the Olympics.
Yeah, no worries. So I think one of the main things is that we're looking at the moment is our operational readiness, and that's across all the teams because I manage teams in the US as well as APAC. You know, making sure we've got all the rotors in place, and you know, it's been stressful for a lot of people. Whereas normally we'd send everyone and you know travel. But there's no travel at the moment, so we can't get anyone sort of in here. All the tech rehearsals, everything's been done remotely. Where we initially thought we could send a load of people out to Tokyo and pull the people over from the US into London so everyone's working together, we haven't been able to do that. So, I mean, one of our main challenges is, one of the main things we've had to do is make sure everyone's been taken on that journey. And that's not always easy. 'Cause normally you can just walk in an office and talk to people and tell them about what you're doing. Now it's just everything's online. You can't just walk past a coffee and go, you know, we've got this for the Olympics. And so it really is about taking everyone on that journey with you. So I'm doing random call-ins with the staff, asking them questions, finding out what they know, what they don't. So I think.
Have you had to kind of rethink, you know, you mentioned that before you could just walk into an office and chat to people, but have you had to rethink how you communicate and what collaborative tools you use? So, you know, or do you just sort of rely on email?
Oh gosh, no. Zoom, everyone's Zoom. Zoom is our world, is our life at the moment. So
Zoomtopia.
The other thing I try and do as well, and it's not easy, we all get camera sick, but try and get everyone to keep their cameras on. Makes such a difference talking to someone with a camera on and a blank screen, just hearing a voice. And I do, and I encourage all of my team meetings, I bully people, I go camera, you know, and I make sort of jokes out of forfeits, but I think it's really important to be able to see someone's face when you're talking to them, because you can see if they're knackered, see if they look really stressed out, and gauge how you're going to be talking to them. So
yeah. And is there any new tech that you're going to be using for the Olympics that you haven't used yet?
So obviously Discovery have been going through a whole tech transformation. It's been called ETT. We've got all of that going live. A lot of it is live at the minute, so you know we're concentrating on our load testing, all the remote capabilities of managing that tech with kind of smart hands on site in countries, whereas normally you'd have your engineers on site. We're working on the smart hands model where we'll talk them through, this is what you have to do, this is how you're going to fix it. So it's not quite so easy. And the same with actually sending people out to Tokyo. We can only send a small portion of the people that we would have sent out, and then they've got to go into quarantines. And, you know, we've got some people booked to come over from the US. Whether they can come still, we don't know. So, you know, things like even war rooms. Normally you'll have everyone in a room making key decisions. That war room is now all virtual. So
yeah,
we've got virtual whiteboards. We're putting in virtual whiteboards. So there's normally you'd be scribbling on a board. And so
yeah, and those sort of collaborative tools are, you know, extremely useful and effective at these sort of times, aren't they? To have sort of virtual collaborative whiteboards and stuff.
Yeah.
And in terms of, you know, you said that you've got people booked to come over from the US and you know, other countries. I expect you've got plan Bs and plan Cs in place in case people can't come over.
Good old virtual.
Yeah.
That's it. It's virtual. What I'm looking at doing as well is we all have our common Zoom account, say, but we're looking at having separate tablets. So in the main technology operations centres in Poland, the US and the UK, we're having Zoom rooms open. So it feels like everyone's in the same room. So literally they can all have a conversation. There's sort of wide camera angles, so you can see the whole of the operations centre in each of the countries. And they can basically just unmute and go, hi, how are you? We've got an issue with this. So we're trying to make it feel like everyone's together. And we're doing, one of the things I've just set up this week is we're going to look at doing speed dating between the teams. because not everyone knows each other. No one can work together. So we're setting up speed dating between the US and Poland and the UK and Poland and US, and getting people to kind of ask questions and get to know each other.
Yeah, because usually on a project like this, you know, the team becomes very tight-knit and
that's right,
get to know each other on a personal level.
You all go out and you have a drink, don't you? And there's meals and there's this and there's training. So there's none of that. So we're doing virtual, everything virtual speed dating, I call it.
And is it your team that's kind of doing those sort of cultural parts and trying to bring the team together, or do you have sort of HR support in building some of those team activities?
Yeah, our HR, they're really supportive, but actually it's myself and my managers trying to bring everyone together. You know, really core that I think it's important that everyone gets their one-to-ones. You know, there's a lot of people who, you know, we know, and I'm sure you've got friends who have all broken during this pandemic, you know, and it is about talking to everyone on a personal level. I think one of the challenges is with Zoom, as you go from one call straight to a next call, you don't have those niceties where, you know, like, so I used to work with Tim, you might go and have a cup of coffee and have your meeting and you do a little bit of, you know, general natter beforehand, but you don't really get that spot. I'm encouraging that now. Have 5 minutes before your actual, you know, meeting, have a natter. Use the first 5 minutes. How's you? What's life? You know, who's bothering you?
Yeah, I'm certainly missing those transition moments and, you know, between meetings and I agree. Brilliant. Thank you, Kerry. I'm going to move on to Tim now. I'm going to come to you, Tim. And obviously, you know, the pandemic did impact the infrastructure and operations team at the BBC. But tell us, what was the biggest part that was impacted for you and your role at the BBC?
So, like everyone else, we kind of exited the building overnight, and then had to work out what the implications of that were. And I think fairly quickly we got to thinking about, as an organisation, what are the things that matter? What do we need to put most protection around? And we started to talk very quickly about protecting services and thinking about changes to programmes. So, like any other broadcaster, all of our live programming just stopped overnight, didn't it? Until we'd all worked out as an industry how to do live in a safe way. So massive changes to schedules and massive service changes. We consolidated services together to some degree. And you might remember Bite Size, and the BBC responded fairly quickly, fairly early on, with a load of programming around schools and homeschooling. So lots and lots of changes in those early days to services and schedules, and therefore that kind of forced some focus on us as an organisation to say, where do we need to focus first? Where are the critical roles that need to be in the building? And it was the technical operations teams, it was the, you know, master control room teams who could do that switching and routing and scheduling and so on. And project teams like mine, actually, who had been busy building stuff and refreshing stuff and transforming infrastructure, just kind of stopped overnight to start with. Now we spent the next 12 months working out how to work back in our buildings safely and to do that stuff. And like Kerry, we've been having to prepare for Olympics and then rescheduled Olympics and sporting events. So we have managed to kind of reinstate some back in building working, but still with some caution around it and still with some protection around it. I think my team sort of splits in two. I lead a team of project engineers and system engineers, broadcast engineers, but also software engineers. And I think just look across those two domains, it was really interesting in the early days that the software engineers just kind of left and they took their laptops with them and they carried on the next day as if they were just kind of at full strength. And I think generally speaking, software engineers typically developing code, sometimes cloud, sometimes on-prem, could just work quite effectively away from home. And we had to put a lot more thinking in around broadcast engineers. I think the task really of those first few weeks and months, I think, actually, as well as that services mindset, protecting the services, we were also saying, okay, how do we make sure that the systems that we've got, that our creators, our producers, our editorial staff use, how can we make those available outside of the building? And it kind of falls into three buckets, right? There were some things that just we'd not even thought about that as an option, or they're technically so complicated that you just needed to be in the building and pressing buttons. There were others on the other extreme where actually, because of investments over the past X number of years, they worked really effectively from day one outside of the building, and we'd never really exercised that, but all of a sudden we were. And there were some in the middle where we had to make sort of tactical, pragmatic changes or workarounds to make as many of those systems work outside of our buildings as possible.
Can you give us a specific example? You mentioned BBC Bite Size. I know that you've worked on Springwatch as well, or any other examples of where there was quite a significant change, and take us a little bit, step by step through what those changes were and the thought processes behind those changes.
Yeah, so I think it's probably worth just pondering a little. I'll come on to Springwatch as well, but it's probably worth pondering onto some of our sort of radio output, news output, and so on, where traditionally we'd had kind of contributors coming into the building to go into a studio to talk to a camera or a microphone, and actually very rapidly we found that we were making much more use of remote contributions, and in terms of technical capability, that varied, right? So that ranged from the stuff that we as broadcasters already knew how to do, how to get contributions back into the building or back into the studio, and we made more use of that, but also huge uptakes in terms of consumer video conferencing tech or whatever. So massive increase in the use of Skype or Teams or Zoom as audio or video contributions into programming. And you'll have seen that on BBC News, right? So often there are Zoom contributors now, where historically we'd have been using that much less. And that applies both for contribution into telly, but also contribution into some of our sort of web output as well. So we did a lot of work, particularly with English regions teams, enabling them to very quickly kind of turn a stream on, get it onto BBC platforms or out onto social using Zoom or iPhones or whatever. With Springwatch, it came at a time when the UK was just kind of feeling a bit locked in, weren't we? And we just needed a bit of outside, and there was no live telly at the time either. And Springwatch came at the right time. The Springwatch team were really keen to do a Springwatch, but if you watched it, if you remember, it wasn't the traditional Springwatch. It wasn't just based in a kind of remote bit of the Cairngorms. It was actually scattered across the UK, and they made much greater use of 30 plus camera feeds, some of which were traditional broadcast camera feeds from sort of lightweight OB type infrastructure, but many of them were just webcams really. And we used Sienna running in the cloud, so there's a lot of cloud production to cope with that kind of pan UK production, and as well making much greater use of web technologies. R&D did some work around animal spotters, AI. My team did some work around some of the streaming tech, so supplementing the broadcasts on linear output with web streams and so on. So there's a real kind of mixture of stuff.
So you've spoken a bit about Zoom and webcams. So is your tech stack full of sort of low-end web tech now? Has your budget gone down significantly?
Our budget has gone down significantly, but that's not entirely just due to coronavirus. I think there is a load more web tech than we used to have around. I mean, that was the general. I mean, we need to be careful that's quite a loaded term, right? So web technologies are not low end by definition. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Web technologies and software and cloud is definitely the direction that we're heading as an organization. We're using much more of that sort of approach to solving tech solutions. But at the same time, I think that we did have to scramble quite fast to just grab whatever we could. And there were some compromises made, right? So editorially, we were making compromises. What's quality? I mean, the idea of Zoom on BBC One, 10 o'clock news, what does that mean? That was unheard of before. So there have been some compromises around that, but there's some real positives with it as well. I mean, the idea that you can sort of have a contributor from anywhere rather than just someone who's within commuting distance of a metropolitan centre, really had a compelling positive impact on that programming. So, I mean, the answer is yes, we're using much more web technologies. We are using a little bit more low end, but not exclusively.
And what tech could you not live without now? What did you not use before that you're using now that you think, God, we just can't move forwards without this?
I mean, in terms of our production tech, it's much more sort of cloud and software. But in terms of just the people side, like Kerry was saying, actually, it's about tools that allow people to work effectively, to solve problems, or to work between technical and operations and editorial. So it's this sort of stuff. It's collaboration platforms, isn't it? And it's not just video conferencing. It's around things like Teams or Slack or those sorts of tools that allow people to work together from different locations.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tim. We're going to come back to you and Kerry shortly. I'm going to go to George now. Welcome, George.
How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
You've got a pretty cool poster behind you.
Yeah, it's the complete collection of garbage pail kids. The office artwork from Electric Theatre.
Brilliant. So George, how ready were you and your team for a sort of complete remote operation when the pandemic sort of hit us and we all came to a giant universal pause?
Well, we were reasonably ready, but then we realised we were, as we looked at what we had available, we realised we were more ready, and as we developed a plan in the kind of short time we had to get everything changed over, as it were. We were quite fairly well equipped, and just needed to kind of draw on things that we had used that were maybe we considered handy, or something that we wouldn't use that often, that were now going to become vital, and things that we knew about that we could quickly come and bring on board. So certain review tools, for example. We kind of had a period where we had kind of one opportunity to kind of execute it very well, in terms of people leaving the building with the equipment they needed, and not just sending everyone home and then thinking about it later. It was right, we have to act now, and kind of make sure we do everything we can in this kind of a key moment, really. And we tried to do this all with little or no budget, because all of a sudden the future became very unclear. We weren't sure if we would, necessarily be around in, a few months' time, because it was very unclear as to what was going to happen.
And when people did leave the office and kind of, you had that one shot of going, right, okay, everyone's set up, go home, you're going to do your job from home now. Yeah. Did you find afterwards, what were the biggest sort of tech issues that were coming out of that? What did you find in terms of challenges?
Mainly it was kind of adapting things we were already using. So for years we've been using remote tools for client approval and remote desktop, and we just brought these to the forefront and adapted all of our kind of working workstations and infrastructure to adapt it to being able to being used remotely. But not necessarily so much a technical issue, but making people aware of how things were going to change, drawing up documentation to make it as easy as possible for people to remote in from home, and then kind of what was to be expected, and making sure people adopted the right kind of viewpoint on how they would be working. So it wouldn't be the same as before. You wouldn't have it's a very simple level. You wouldn't have a desk phone, or you wouldn't be able to speak to the person next to you. You have to try and it sounds silly, but just to make it clear to people that it's going, you will need to behave differently. So we've been kind of working for years with people off, who haven't been in the studio. So we've had guys, we try and work with talent outside of London, so we can allow people to remote into our systems here and work. And so it was just expanding the use of that, really. And adding on additional services. We had guys in kind of nearby in nearby Europe. Let's say up anything from 5 years ago onwards. And now we're looking at having people that we collaborate in Australia and Brazil, driving workstations, working with teams. Yeah, we've all had to make some major adaptations to things that we were in place, but also specifically networking. We've had to kind of rethink our networking topology and infrastructure, and make some kind of changes to bandwidth levels there. Also, bolt on some additional services from our internet service provider, but that's been very easy to do.
There is a bit of a grey line, isn't there, between home internet services, bandwidth, connections, etc., and kind of the responsibility of the employer. Did you find that quite sort of difficult to get your head around in terms of where your employee's responsibility ends and yours begins, and vice versa?
Yeah, we still have ongoing issues there with I don't know what you call it, but there's around 5 o'clock internet efficiency and reliability seems to drop off. I think when everyone gets home from work or school and turns on Netflix and YouTube and starts using the resources that are available to the road you're living on. But we try and encourage people to be wary of that, and to not just immediately assume that let's say everything's gone down because they can't quite their mouse has become non-responsive or not as good as it was earlier in the day. We only allow people to remote to our workstations, and we don't really allow anyone to use any home equipment, for example. So and that's all locked down via VPN, firewalls, and other security measures. Problems around that, though, we have to get people up and running with different home equipment, and it seems like a silly point to raise, but trying to get people with a stable connection and the right kind of work environment to whatever equipment they have at home. They might have a monitor with a resolution that we've not worked with before, and that takes some work to get going. And also they might have a different model of Wacom tablet, for example, and so there's a lot of silly things. We are quite flexible, though. The support team, we do help people with whatever they need, really, because at the end of the day, if we don't, and we say, oh, that's your internet problem, it's your internet provider's fault, then we're not getting them to do their work, and at the end of the day, we need them to get on with their work with us.
So as lockdown kind of eases, and perhaps people will start to go back to the office, do you think that your team will start to work their way back to the office, or do you think now that you set everything up and actually you're in a flow and you find things are working, that this is it now, this is the way your team will work?
So we've kind of provisioned for both. We're expecting around a 50-50 split going forward, in possibly starting by the end of the year, possibly. So we are provisioning for both, and we're kind of working on kind of unified systems that will make it a kind of a consistent experience, whether you're at home or whether you're in the office, and should resolve any switching between workstations issues, and there'll be benefits of coming into the office, and you'll have obviously there'll be better facilities that allow you enable you to look at your images on a like a grade 1 monitor, for example, or but if you are at home, we are looking to cater for those people. They won't be at a disadvantage, and we're looking to put in more and more equipment that allows better collaboration between people at home and who are at office. So we've been using mobile phones and laptops, and I think we're going to be thinking more along the lines of making some kind of portal into a room in say an edit suite into the building, where everyone can be seen and heard in the room, and everyone can be seen who is remote on the TV that's possibly up on the wall or on the stand. So we do want to make it a kind of even playing field for everybody.
Yeah, and it sounds like a well thought through. You've got different tools and different scenarios that you can use. But yeah. I want to ask the question about leadership, and Kerry and Tim, I'd like to ask you the same question in a second as well. I mean, obviously this is a whole brand new experience for everyone, And so in addition to kind of thinking about the tech, you need to think about your own leadership style and your own management style in these situations. George, did you sort of reflect on what type of leadership style you would take during the pandemic? And have you kind of had a chance to think about in the future, you know, when you go to a 50-50 model, how you'll be able to kind of manage and lead your team in that scenario?
Yeah, we've expanded the team in kind of preparation for having to manage both a studio and a number of home workers. So we are catering for that. We intend to have an on-site presence every day of the week, and then people can come, you know, work from home days in my team, and they can work on projects. The other thing to note is that we won't be relying on-site equipment anymore. It's probably something that the BBC and Discovery wouldn't dream of having. We currently still have a computer room in this building, and it's in a Victorian building, and so we're currently moving that out to a data centre. So we won't be as reliant on that. That won't be as reliant on us to kind of fix leaks and air conditioning problems and fuses going, that kind of stuff. So we are taking a number of steps around that. But you know, generally been looking after the team as best I can, and trying to talk to people. You know, it's easy not to speak to people, but I kind of, you know, always try and force. Let's have a chat. Let's have a video call, and we can, you know, have a little chin wag and catch up. And so yeah, I'm trying to keep face to face as much as I can.
Yeah. And Kerry, for you, how have you had to adapt your leadership style through the pandemic?
You know, so you still do your one-to-ones, and I've really drilled it into my stuff. Even now, one-to-ones are more key than ever to understand if someone's okay. I mentioned a bit earlier, I've certainly been doing this with my new team in Poland. I do down the pub with Kerry. I don't talk about work. I just let them come in and ask what they want. I have this virtual background of someone serving a drink, and we just open it up, and it allows everyone to get to know each other, to have a chat, and actually learn stuff about each other a bit more, rather than it's just work focused. Because as I said, you do find on those Zoom calls, you work, next Zoom, work, next Zoom. And sometimes what I do as well is I just do a routine calling. You know, I might be in a Uber going into the office, and I'll just ring someone up and go, how are you doing? And that won't be one of my direct reports. It might be one of their direct reports or their direct reports. And I think it's really important, just a general, how are you touching?
Yeah.
There are people who are going to be broken out there, and you won't see them. The other thing, like I said, is always encourage people to put their cameras on if you are having a chat. I don't mean informal meetings, that doesn't matter, but if you're having an informal, look into their eyes a bit. You know, I've seen people with the hair, and then gradually the hair grows, you know, and then suddenly they've got a haircut. But I do think that's is key.
So you can read their physical cues and kind of gauge what their body language is. Yeah. And Tim, what about you? What's your, you know, do you think that your leadership style has changed throughout the last 12 months?
Yeah, I think it has. I think I've found myself talking about the people thing much more than ever before in my career. So I think the role of a technology leader more than ever now is about leading people and leading technology and strategy. And you know, we've talked about that as an industry for years and years, but it's really come to the fore, I think, in the last 12 months. And I think, you know, cultural shifts around how we do work have changed significantly, and not all bad, actually. There's been some tricky stuff around the sort of thing that Kerry was referring to. How do you kind of just check in with people? How do you make sure they're doing okay? How do you make decisions that you would have done over a coffee? But also some really positive things about it as well. You know, we've all, I'm sure, have had to work across different locations in any case, right? And that's become much easier. So there's been a sort of a leveling up. I think the other thing is it has, the last 12 months, got harder, not easier, right? we've almost lost that initial relationship credit that we had at the start, where relationships were formed and we can sustain them for a period of time without seeing people. But actually, it really comes home when you think about joiners or movers or leavers. Actually, they haven't had the benefit of building those relationships, and that's hard. And we've just about coped in the last 12 months. So we're kind of really looking forward to getting back to a little bit more face-to-face time, aren't we?
Yeah, I think taking people on the journey now is definitely harder.
Yeah.
We mustn't forget that change management side of things, and taking anyone on that journey. Now, I have shift staff. Now, I might give them a call after I've had a couple of bottles of wine at night just to go hi and tell them what's going on in life, because they'll miss out because they're busy on nights. And we all get email heavy. We get sunk in emails, and people say, we'll send you a video. Okay. I'd much rather have a conversation and just tell them where you're going. What is the journey? How are we getting there? How do we do it together? But you're right, Tim, about leavers and joiners, new starters, they're not coming in and having their, not being funny, boring inductions, but they're also not getting to know the people. And this is why I'm doing this kind of speed dating thing. So making people get to know each other, giving them 5 minutes together and then moving on to the next, another 5 minutes. Just talk generally, no topic, just talk.
And what about identifying talent that might be sort of ready for a promotion? Is that harder, to do whilst people are behind screens?
I mean, you can get metrics out of things, can't you? And, out tools and metrics. And I don't think it is just about that. You can still gauge, and I've been just talking in the chat, a lot of stuff's about people having that right attitude. That can-do attitude, and you can see that who kind of shines. You've got your plodders, but if you've got someone with the right attitude, they'll invest time and their own time. They're not a clock off at 5 person, and you then tend to invest time back in them. So, certainly, what I'm now doing at Discovery is something that we also did in the BBC, is creating job families where we're starting to look at juniors and analysts and senior analysts, so we can bring the younger talent in. And I'm working with Rise and some other people in. Where do we get that young talent? And I'm not saying that it's all about young, but it is bringing people in, training them up, and then eventually making them seniors. So I think you can still see it if you engage with them enough. If people aren't engaging with their staff, managers aren't, then, people aren't going to get recognised and seen. Yeah.
And in terms of, corporate cultures, I mean, we've smashed through quite a few barriers and stigmas in terms of, working from home and working fixed hours and all that sort of stuff. It's kind of accelerated, and we've leapfrogged that stage where we've had to kind of convince the leadership team that it's the right thing to do. But what do you think, that it's happened quite organically and people are doing it because they've been forced into doing it, but going forward, what do you think corporate organizations will have to do to kind of maintain that culture of looking after people's well-being, ensuring that people can work from home, not having stigmas attached to how you work and where you work?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly I'll talk in Discovery, they're sending out things for people to put, is it working from home something for you, and actually looking at it as a whole, not just, Kerry, is it you want to work from home, and looking at what we can actually do to help people. It's not going to keep everyone happy. But I mean, Discovery are really good. They brought on people like Boris Becker to talk to all the company. They brought all random celebs in to come and talk to us. So everyone then wanted to engage. There's a lot of people all over the world. So they've done some really good stuff. And HR have done some bits where we all had to stand up and exercise. And you've never seen so many bellies in your life. COVID bellies come out where they put your arms up, and it's good. It's just everyone's laughing about it.
I think this corporate culture thing will become really important from a sort of recruitment and attraction and retention perspective, actually, because I think we're already starting to see it. People are looking for that ability to have a good work-life balance, right? They're no longer bound to working for a company that's just within commuting distance. So it levels everything up. And I think as organizations, we have to think really carefully about what the offer is, because we're competing on a different level to what we were for talent, aren't we? So I think, and we don't know what the right answers are, I don't think, as an industry yet, but everyone's grappling with this, and it's not just media and tech, is it?
No, brilliant. I think we're going to have to wrap up there. I'm going to say thank you to George, Kerry, and Tim for joining us today. Really good conversation and really interesting projects that you're all working on. Thank you to everyone joining us at home, and go get yourself a cup of tea or a sandwich, because we've got another session starting in 20 minutes, I believe. So yeah, thanks guys for joining us, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.